Fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin, and you would lose, the next 20x opportunity for you. So you almost don't want them to figure it out too fast, because otherwise you're the stupid money. I'd rather be the smart money and wait for the stupid money to learn over the course of 5 to 10 years, because we need someone to be buying this stuff when it hits $5 million a coin, Anthony.
Investor panelist Michael Saylor recently warned investors to sell off all other assets before the impending crash occurs. A well-known Bitcoin bull, Michael Saylor, explains in this video why currency collapses are inevitable and gives his Bitcoin price prediction of above $5 million per coin. Also, if you're interested in financial topics, consider subscribing and liking the video. It's free, and you can always change your mind.
We're still in the stage of adoption where there is friction and there's prejudice and there is fear, right? There is. So I think we can all agree that there's still that, but the indicia, right? The indicia of institutional adoption and the likelihood that the institution and the establishment embrace this has never been clearer than it is today. Let's say it's going to be a 36-month, 24-month, 36-month, 48-month delay before banks catch up, but smaller banks are offering Bitcoin services. The larger banks, not yet, but Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, there are parts of those banks that are very reactionary and they push back. And on the other hand, another part of Morgan Stanley ends up owning $500 million worth of my stock, right? At the same time that the part of Morgan Stanley doesn't want anybody to buy your fund. And so these are, these are not monolithic conglomerates, right? These tend to be massive organizations with 100 different divisions, each of them making independent decisions. And you got to figure
they're economically
month by month, we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess, from 2022 to 2030. I think the good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin, and you would lose, the next 20x opportunity for you. So you almost don't want them to figure it out too fast, because otherwise you're the stupid money. I'd rather be the smart money and wait for the stupid money to learn over the course of 5 to 10 years, because we need someone to be buying this stuff when it hits $5 million a coin, Anthony. I think the sovereign wealth funds will come first. I mean, the first adoption will be any sovereign wealth fund like UAE or Saudi Arabia or Norway or Switzerland that would hold big tech stocks. If you would hold $10 billion worth of Apple or Google or Facebook or Amazon, I think some of those will roll into Bitcoin, because it's just another tech investment for them, and it's totally within their mandate. I think that some countries are being forced to consider other payment options. I mean, like the Russians are being forced. If you get kicked off of SWIFT, that drives and catalyzes something. And then I think it'll be a while, but we're really waiting for a small, mid-sized company that has its own currency to print its currency and buy Bitcoin. I don't think it's a this year thing or a next year thing, but at some point somebody will figure it out. If you're selling $50 billion worth of commodities or exports every year, and you're using the dollar as your treasury reserve asset, you're propping up $100 trillion currency that's inflating at 10, 15, 20% a year. So that's just shipping. That's in essence shipping all of your treasury to the dollar over the course of a decade. If you switch that and you started buying CNY, you'd be propping up the Chinese currency. Instead of propping up $100 trillion currency, you'd be propping up a $20 or $30 trillion currency, and that's to the benefit of the Chinese. If you switch to gold, you would be propping up a $12 trillion currency. And if you switch to Bitcoin, you would be propping up a less than $1 trillion currency. So if people were rational, I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smart or smarter than you, could you? Right? So I guess they're not really totally rational, but if you were rational, the obvious thing to do if you're an export country is you start exporting in Bitcoin, and then you sweep your cash flows into Bitcoin, and then you probably make like 500 billion or $1 trillion because you did that. If you're the first mover, who will do that? Well, I mean, why wouldn't you do that, by the way? Why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid, and they have political constraints. They're afraid of their shareholders. The accounting makes it ugly. So, you wonder, why don't they just bend over and make $1 trillion? Remember when I tweeted to Elon, I said, I didn't say buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I said buy 10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then issue $10 billion of converts and buy 10 billion more, and you make 100 billion, and then all the S&P follows you and you make $1 trillion. Well, he didn't quite do that, right? I mean, he did a little bit. I'm okay with the $1.5 billion, but the point is, why doesn't someone do a $25 billion buy at Google? And the answer is because of politics and institutional inertia. And, some people don't want the trillion. Okay, so why doesn't a government do it? Politics, institutional inertia. When will they do it? Well, that this is the butterfly effect, right, guys? It's like, how do you predict when someone gets whacked on the side of the head and knocked out of their comfort zone and decides to go and bend over and pick up the $1 trillion? I don't know, right? Like, my real point is, any of 1,000 people could do it, and maybe none of them will do it. But if you're betting that not a single one of them wants the $1 trillion, I mean, it seems to me like over a decade, somebody wants the $1 trillion. I just don't know who will have the courage and the clarity of conviction to do it.
Right.
Now, the real question is, what do you adopt as your treasury reserve asset? And if it's currency and currency derivatives in dollars, you have made the institutional decision to surrender 99.5% of your assets to the government over the course of 80, 90 years. So I guess the metaphor would be, what if Anthony, what if I told you I was going to make you 20 years older so that I could be 20 years younger? And what if I told you I was going to take all of your children and accelerate their age to age 75 so that I, at age 65, could be rolled back to 30 because I'm so brilliant that I know your future, and I should run the country for you for another 30 years. What you really have is a parasitic situation where you're siphoning off the life force and the energy from the working class to the property class, from the free market to the centrally controlled government to the government, from market programs and free commerce to the wards of the state and to the government initiatives, right? And from peacetime pursuits to wartime pursuits.
Yep.
And that's been going on since time immemorial for 10,000 years. It's the story of every empire, every city-state, every country. And the only choice you had in the last 10,000 years was maybe gold, but gold was never perfected money. It was always it's double imperfect, right? It's losing 2% of its value a year, and also is getting debased by whoever controls the mint, and it's also getting seized. So gold is like triple imperfect money. We didn't have anything that looked like theoretically perfect money until January 3rd, 2009. And then it took about 10 years of beating on it to determine that it wasn't going to crumple under some kind of engineering mistake. And so now here you are in the year 2022, and reasonable, intelligent people have concluded that this is engineered perfect money. That's like 2, 3, 4% of the marketplace. 97% of the people don't even know what money means. And if you don't know what money is, then you couldn't actually go on a search for engineered perfect money. And if you look at the Russians and the Chinese, they've all been hit with a 2x4 in the head And they've been invited to consider whether or not a Treasury reserve strategy of holding fiat currency and credit derivatives is in fact perfect money. And now they know it isn't perfect. And they either have to look back to the 19th century and gold, which was the best idea for 10,000 years, but a crappy idea that failed 5,000 times. Or, and we know why, because it's centralized and you can debase it. Or you roll forward to the 21st century and you ask, is there a better idea? And Bitcoin is the better idea, wrapped in all the crypto technology that comes with. So what's going to happen, right? Intelligent people are going to watch YouTube and they're going to realize that the currency has a half-life, right? The US dollar had a half-life of 10 years. And now it has a half-life of 5 years. And every other currency has a half-life of 3 years. Gold has a half-life of 30 years. Bitcoin has a half-life of forever. Infinite, forever. Once people figure that out, you have a mass exodus, an evacuation, not from Europe to the New World, but from real space to cyberspace. The money goes from analog to digital, and it goes from unencrypted to encrypted. And the only place you can run to save your life force, to avoid, in essence, what is a heat death or an energy death by having all the energy sucked out of your body, is you have to encrypt your life force, right, on a network which is beyond nation state control. And there's one of them, right? Bitcoin, that's what we're talking about. I think that's what happens, right? I mean, the intelligent people are going to exit, right, on an arc of encrypted energy. And the ignorant ones are not going to exit, and they're going to have the life force sucked out of them.
Here's Michael Saylor on why every currency eventually goes to zero, but why he believes Bitcoin will go to $5 million per coin. It's one thing to talk the talk, but Saylor also walks the walk in a recent Twitter update. Saylor revealed that he has a nearly 205 million Bitcoin back loan with Silvergate Bank in order to purchase even more Bitcoin. To put it another way, Saylor is using his already massive stack of Bitcoin as collateral in order to be able to borrow.